English story, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. Long time ago in China there lived a poor boy, whose name was Aladdin. Aladdin lived with his mother. One day a rich and distinguished-looking man came to their house and said to Aladdin's mother, "I am a merchant from Arabia and want your son to come with me. I will reward him handsomely." Aladdin's mother instantly agreed. Little did she know that the man pretending to be a rich merchant was in reality a magician. Next day, Aladdin, having packed his belongings, left with the merchant. After many hours of traveling, the merchant stopped. Aladdin stopped. Surprised that they should stop in such a desolate spot, he looked around. There was nothing in sight for miles. The merchant pulled out some colored powder from his pocket and threw in the ground. The next instant the whole place was filled with smoke. As the smoke cleared, Aladdin saw a huge opening in the ground. It was a cave. The merchant turned to Aladdin and said, "I want you to go inside this cave. There will be more gold than you have ever seen. Take as much as you want. You will also see an old lamp. Please bring that back to me. Here, take this ring. It will help you." Aladdin was very suspicious, but decided to do as was told. He lowered himself into the cave, thinking all the while that it would be difficult to climb out without help. Aladdin entered the cave and, just like the merchant had said, saw gold, jewelry, diamonds, and other valuables. He filled his pockets. When this was done, he looked for the lamp. It was lying in the corner, full of dust and dirty. He picked it up and ran to the cave's opening and shouted to the merchant, "I have your lamp. Can you please pull me out? Give me the lamp," said the merchant. Aladdin was not sure that he would be pulled out if he gave back the lamp, so he said, "First, please pull me out." Aladdin and the genie this angered the merchant. With a loud cry, he pulled out the same colorful powder and threw it on the cave opening, sealing it with a huge boulder. Aladdin was depressed. He thought, that was no rich merchant. He was surely a magician. I wonder why this lamp was so important to him. As he was thinking, he rubbed the lamp. All of a sudden a strange mist filled the room, and from the mist emerged a stranger-looking man. He said, "My master, I am the genie of the lamp. You have rescued me. What would your wish be?" Aladdin was scared, but he said in quivering voice, "Take me back home." And the next moment Aladdin was home hugging his mother. He told her of the magician and the lamp. Aladdin again summoned the genie. This time when the genie appeared, he was not scared. He said, "Genie, I want a palace, not an old hut." Again, to Aladdin and his mother's amazement, in front of them was a magnificent palace. Time passed. Aladdin married the Sultan's daughter and was very happy. It so happened that the evil magician got to know of Aladdin's good fortune. He came by Aladdin's palace pretending to exchange old lamps for new. The princess, Aladdin's wife, not knowing the value of the lamp to Aladdin, called out to the magician to wait. As soon as the magician saw the lamp, he grabbed it from the princess' hand and rubbed it. The genie appeared. "You are my master and your wish is my command," he said to the magician. "Take Aladdin's palace to the great desert far away from here," ordered the magician. When Aladdin came home, there was no palace and no princess. He guessed it must be the evil magician who had come to take revenge on him. All was not lost. Aladdin had a ring that the magician had given to him. Aladdin pulled out that ring, rubbed it. Another genie appeared. Aladdin said, "Take me to my princess soon." Aladdin was in Arabia with his princess. He found his lamp lying on a table next to the magician. Before the magician could react, Aladdin jumped for the lamp and got hold of it. As soon as he had the lamp, Aladdin rubbed it. The genie appeared again and said, "My master, Aladdin, it is indeed good to serve you again. What is it that you wish?" "I want you to send this magician to another world, so that he never harms anybody," said Aladdin. Aladdin's wish was carried out. The evil magician disappeared forever. The genie carried Aladdin, the princes, and the palace back to China. He stayed with Aladdin for the rest of his life. Aladdin's Story, Part 1. There once lived in one of the large and rich cities of China a tailor named Mustafa. He was very poor. He could hardly, by his daily labor, maintain himself and his family, which consisted only of his wife and a son. His son, who was called Aladdin, was a very careless and idle fellow. He was disobedient to his father and story of Aladdin mother, and would go out early in the morning and stay out all day, playing in the streets and public places with idle children of his own age. When he was old enough to learn a trade, his father took him into his own shop and taught him how to use his needle. But all his father's endeavors to keep him to his work were vain, for no sooner was his back turned than he was gone for that day. Mustafa chastised him, but Aladdin was incorrigible, and his father, to his great grief, was forced to abandon him to his idleness, and was so much troubled about him that he fell sick and died in a few months. Aladdin, who was now no longer restrained by the fear of a father, gave himself entirely over to his idle habits, and was never out of the streets from his companions. This course he followed till he was 15 years old, without giving his mind to any useful pursuit, or the least reflection on what would become of him, as he was one day playing, according to custom, in the street with his evil associates. A stranger passing by stood to observe him. This stranger was a sorcerer known as the African magician, as he had been but 2 days arrived from Africa, his native country. The African magician, observing in Aladdin's countenance something which assured him that he was a fit boy for his purpose, inquired his name and history of some of his companions, and when he had learned all he desired to know, went up to him and, taking him aside from his comrades, said, "Child, was not your father called Mustafa the tailor?" "Yes, sir," answered the boy, "but he has been dead a long time." At these words, the African magician threw his arms about Aladdin's neck and kissed him several times, with tears in his eyes, and said, "I'm your uncle. Your worthy father was my own brother. I knew you at first sight. You are so like him." Then he gave Aladdin a handful of small money, saying, "Go, my son, to your mother. Give my love to her, and tell her that I will visit her tomorrow, that I may see where my good brother lived so long and ended his days." Aladdin ran to his mother, overjoyed at the money his uncle had given him. "Mother," said he, "have I an uncle?" "No, child," replied his mother, "you have no uncle by your father's side or mine." "I am just now come," said Aladdin, "from a man who says he is my uncle and my father's brother. He cried and kissed me when I told him my father was dead, and gave me money, sending his love to you, and promising to come and pay you a visit, that he may see the house my father lived and died in." "Indeed, child," replied the mother, "your father had no brother, nor have you an uncle." The next day, the magician found Aladdin playing in another part of the town, and embracing him as before, put 2 pieces of gold into his hand, and said to him, "Carry this, child, to your mother. Tell her that I will come and see her tonight, and bid her get us something for supper. But first show me the house where you live." Aladdin's Story, Part 2. Aladdin showed the African magician the house, and carried the 2 pieces of gold to his mother, who went out and bought provisions, and, considering she wanted various utensils, borrowed them of her neighbors. She spent the whole day in preparing the supper, and at night, when it was ready, said to her son, "Perhaps the stranger knows not how to find our house. Go and bring him if you meet with him." Aladdin was just ready to go, when the magician knocked at the door, and came in loaded with wine and all sorts of fruits, which he brought for a dessert. After he had given what he brought into Aladdin's hands, he saluted his mother, and desired her to show him the place where his brother Mustafa used to sit on the sofa, and when she had done so, he fell down and kissed it several times, crying out, with tears in his eyes, "My poor brother, how unhappy am I, not to have come soon enough to give you one last embrace." Aladdin's mother desired him to sit down in the same place, but he declined. "No," said he, "I shall not do that. But give me leave to sit opposite to it, that, although I see not the master of a family so dear to me, I may at least behold the place where he used to sit." When the magician had made choice of a place and sat down, he began to enter into discourse with Aladdin's mother. "My good sister," said he, "do not be surprised at your never having seen me. All the time you have been married to my brother Mustafa of happy memory. I have been 40 years absent from this country, which is my native place, as well as my late brother's, and during that time have traveled into the Indies, Persia, Arabia, Syria, and Egypt, and afterward crossed over into Africa, where I took up my abode. At last, as it is natural for a man, I was desirous to see my native country again and to embrace my dear brother, and finding I had strength enough to undertake so long a journey, I made the necessary preparations and set out. Nothing ever afflicted me so much as hearing of my brother's death, but God be praised for all things. It is a comfort for me to find, as it were, my brother and a son who has his most remarkable features." The African magician, perceiving that the widow wept at the remembrance of her husband, changed the conversation, and turning toward her son, asked him, "What business do you follow? Are you of any trade?" At this question the youth hung down his head, and was not a little abashed when his mother answered, "Aladdin is an idle fellow. His father, when alive, strove all he could to teach him his trade, but could not succeed. And since his death, notwithstanding all I can say to him, he does nothing but idle away his time in the streets as you saw him, without considering he is no longer a child. And if you do not make him ashamed of it, I despair of his ever coming to any good. For my part, I am resolved, one of these days, to turn him out of doors and let him provide for himself." After these words Aladdin's mother burst into tears, and the magician said, "This is not well, nephew. You must think of helping yourself and getting your livelihood. There are many sorts of trades. Perhaps you do not like your father's and would prefer another. I will endeavor to help you. If you have no mind to learn any handicraft, I will take a shop for you, furnish it with all sorts of fine stuffs and linens, and then with the money you make of them, you can lay in fresh goods and live in an honorable way. Tell me freely what you think of my proposal. You shall always find me ready to keep my word." This plan just suited Aladdin, who hated work. He told the magician he had a greater inclination to that business than to any other, and that he should be much obliged to him for his kindness. "Well, then," said the African magician, "I will carry you with me tomorrow, clothe you as handsomely as the best merchants in the city, and afterward we will open a shop as I mentioned." The widow, after his promises of kindness to her son, no longer doubted that the magician was her husband's brother. She thanked him for his good intentions, and after having exhorted Aladdin to render himself worthy of his uncle's favor, served up supper, at which they talked of several indifferent matters, and then the magician took his leave and retired. He came again the next day, as he had promised, and took Aladdin with him to a merchant, who sold all sorts of clothes for different ages and ranks ready-made, and a variety of fine stuffs, and bade Aladdin choose those he preferred, which he paid for. Aladdin's Story, Part 3. When Aladdin found himself so handsomely equipped, he returned his uncle thanks, who thus addressed him, "As you are soon to be a merchant, it is proper you should frequent these shops and be acquainted with them." He then showed him the largest and finest mosques, carried him to the Kanzor inns where the merchants and travelers lodge, and afterward to the Sultan's palace where he had free access, and at last brought him to his own khan where, meeting with some merchants he had become acquainted with since his arrival, he gave them a treat, to make them and his pretended nephew acquainted. This entertainment lasted till night. When Aladdin would have taken leave of his uncle to go home, the magician would not let him go by himself, but conducted him to his mother, who, as soon as she saw him so well dressed, was transported with joy, and bestowed 1,000 blessings upon the magician. Early the next morning the magician called again for Aladdin, and said he would take him to spend that day in the country, and on the next he would purchase the shop. He then led him out at one of the gates of the city, to some magnificent palaces, to each of which belonged beautiful gardens, into which anybody might enter. At every building he came to, he asked Aladdin if he did not think it fine, and the youth was ready to answer. When any one presented itself, crying out, "Here is a finer house, uncle, than any we have yet seen," by this artifice the cunning magician led Aladdin some way into the country, and as he meant to carry him further to execute his design, he took an opportunity to sit down in one of the gardens, on the brink of a fountain of clear water, which discharged itself by a lion's mouth of bronze into a basin, pretending to be tired. "Come, nephew," said he, "you must be weary as well as I. Let us rest ourselves, and we shall be better able to pursue our walk." The magician next pulled from his girdle a handkerchief with cakes and fruit, and during this short repast he exhorted his nephew to leave off bad company, and to seek that of wise and prudent men, to improve by their conversation, "For," said he, "you will soon be at man's estate, and you cannot too early begin to imitate their example." When they had eaten as much as they liked, they got up, and pursued their walk through gardens separated from one another only by small ditches, which marked out the limits without interrupting the communication. So great was the confidence the inhabitants reposed in each other. By this means the African magician drew Aladdin insensibly beyond the gardens, and crossed the country till they nearly reached the mountains. At last they arrived between two mountains of moderate height and equal size, divided by a narrow valley, which was the place where the magician intended to execute the design that had brought him from Africa to China. "We will go no further now," said he to Aladdin. "I will show you here some extraordinary things, which, when you have seen, you will thank me for. But while I strike a light, gather up all the loose dry sticks you can see to kindle a fire with." Aladdin found so many dried sticks that he soon collected a great heap. The magician presently set them on fire, and when they were in a blaze, threw in some incense, pronouncing several magical words which Aladdin did not understand. He had scarcely done so when the earth opened just before the magician, and discovered a stone with a brass ring fixed in it. Aladdin was so frightened that he would have run away, but the magician caught hold of him, and gave him such a box on the ear that he knocked him down. Aladdin got up trembling, and, with tears in his eyes, said to the magician, "What have I done, uncle, to be treated in this severe manner? I am your uncle." Answered the magician, "I supplied the place of your father, and you ought to make no reply. But, child," added he, softening, "do not be afraid, for I shall not ask anything of you, but that you obey me punctually, if you would reap the advantages which I intend you. Know, then, that under this stone there is hidden a treasure, destined to be yours, and which will make you richer than the greatest monarch in the world. No person but yourself is permitted to lift this stone, or enter the cave, so you must punctually execute what I may command, for it is a matter of great consequence both to you and me." Aladdin, amazed at all he saw and heard, forgot what was past, and, rising, said, "Well, uncle, what is to be done? Command me. I am ready to obey." "I am overjoyed, child," said the African magician, embracing him. "Take hold of the ring and lift up that stone." "Indeed, uncle," replied Aladdin, "I am not strong enough. You must help me." "You have no occasion for my assistance," answered the magician. "If I help you, we shall be able to do nothing. Take hold of the ring and lift it up. You will find it will come easily." Aladdin did as the magician bade him, raised the stone with ease, and laid it on one side. When the stone was pulled up, there appeared a staircase about 3 or 4 feet deep, leading to a door. "Descend, my son," said the African magician, "those steps, and open that door. It will lead you into a palace divided into 3 great halls. In each of these you will see 4 large brass cisterns, placed on each side, full of gold and silver, but take care you do not meddle with them. Before you enter the first hall, be sure to tuck up your robe, wrap it about you, and then pass through the second into the third without stopping. Above all things, have a care that you do not touch the walls so much as with your clothes, for if you do, you will die instantly. At the end of the third hall, you will find a door which opens into a garden, planted with fine trees loaded with fruit. Walk directly across the garden to a terrace, where you will see a niche before you, and in that niche a lighted lamp. Take the lamp down and put it out. When you have thrown away the wick and poured out the liquor, put it in your waistband and bring it to me. Do not be afraid that the liquor will spoil your clothes, for it is not oil, and the lamp will be dry as soon as it is thrown out. After these words the magician drew a ring off his finger, and put it on one of Aladdin's, saying, "It is a talisman against all evil, so long as you obey me. Go, therefore, boldly, and we shall both be rich all our lives." Aladdin's Story, Part 4. Aladdin descended the steps and, opening the door, found the 3 halls just as the African magician had described. He went through them with all the precaution the fear of death could inspire, crossed the garden without stopping, took down the lamp from the niche, threw out the wick and the liquor, and, as the magician had desired, put it in his waistband. But as he came down from the terrace, seeing it was perfectly dry, he stopped in the garden to observe the trees, which were loaded with extraordinary fruit, of different colors on each tree. Some bore fruit entirely white, and some clear and transparent as crystal, some pale red and others deeper, some green, blue, and purple, and others yellow. In short, there was fruit of all colors. The white were pearls, the clear and transparent diamonds, the deep red rubies, the paler balas rubies, the green emeralds, the blue turquoises, the purple amethysts, and the yellow topazes. Aladdin, ignorant of their value, would have preferred figs or grapes or pomegranates, but as he had his uncle's permission, he resolved to gather some of every sort. Having filled the 2 new purses his uncle had bought for him with his clothes, he wrapped some up in the skirts of his vest, and crammed his bosom as full as it could hold. Aladdin, having thus loaded himself with riches of which he knew not the value, returned through the 3 halls with the utmost precaution, and soon arrived at the mouth of the cave, where the African magician awaited him with the utmost impatience. As soon as Aladdin saw him, he cried out, "Pray, uncle, lend me your hand to help me out." "Give me the lamp first," replied the magician. "It will be troublesome to you, indeed, uncle," answered Aladdin. "I cannot now, but I will as soon as I am up." The African magician was determined that he would have the lamp before he would help him up, and Aladdin, who had encumbered himself so much with his fruit that he could not well get at it, refused to give it until he was out of the cave. The African magician, provoked at this obstinate refusal, flew into a passion, threw a little of his incense into the fire, and pronounced magical words, when the stone which had closed the mouth of the staircase moved into its place, with the earth over it in the same manner as it lay at the arrival of the magician and Aladdin. This action of the magician plainly revealed to Aladdin that he was no uncle of his, but one who designed him evil. The truth was that he had learned from his magic books the secret and the value of this wonderful lamp, the owner of which would be made richer than any earthly ruler, and hence his journey to China. His art had also told him that he was not permitted to take it himself, but must receive it as a voluntary gift from the hands of another person. Hence he employed young Aladdin, and hoped by a mixture of kindness and authority to make him obedient to his word. And when he found that his attempt had failed, he set out to return to Africa, but avoided the town, lest any person who had seen him leave in company with Aladdin should make inquiries after the youth. Aladdin, being suddenly enveloped in darkness, cried, and called out to his uncle to tell him he was ready to give him the lamp, but in vain. Since his cries could not be heard, he descended to the bottom of the steps. And in an expectation of passing from the present darkness to a speedy death in this great emergency, he said, "There is no strength or power but in the great and high God." And in joining his hands to pray, he rubbed the ring, which the magician had put on his finger. Immediately a genie of frightful aspect appeared, and said, "What wouldst thou have? I am ready to obey thee." With a design to get into the palace, but the door, which was opened before by enchantment, was now shut by the same means. He then redoubled his cries and tears, sat down on the steps without any hopes of ever seeing light again. "I serve him who possesses the ring on thy finger. I and the other slaves of that ring." At another time Aladdin would have been frightened at the sight of so extraordinary a figure. But the danger he was in made him answer without hesitation, "Whoever thou art, deliver me from this place." He had no sooner spoken these words than he found himself on the very spot where the magician had last left him, and no sign of cave or opening, nor disturbance of the earth. Returning God thanks to find himself once more in the world, he made the best of his way home. When he got within his mother's door, the joy to see her and his weakness for want of sustenance made him so faint that he remained for a long time as dead. As soon as he recovered, he related to his mother all that had happened to him. "Mother," replied Aladdin, "keep your cotton for another time, and give me the lamp I brought home with me yesterday. I will go and sell it, and the money I shall get for it will serve both for breakfast and dinner, and perhaps supper too." And they were both very vehement in their complaints of the cruel magician. Aladdin slept very soundly till late the next morning, when the first thing he said to his mother was that he wanted something to eat, and wished she would give him his breakfast. "Alas, child," said she, "I have not a bit of bread to give you. You ate up all the provisions I had in the house yesterday, but I have a little cotton, which I have spun. I will go and sell it, and buy bread and something for our dinner." Aladdin's mother took the lamp, and said to her son, "Here it is, but it is very dirty. If it was a little cleaner, I believe it would bring something more." She took some fine sand and water to clean it, but had no sooner begun to rub it than in an instant a hideous genie of gigantic size appeared before her, and said to her in a voice of thunder, "What wouldst thou have? I am ready to obey thee as thy slave, and the slave of all those who have that lamp in their hands. I and the other slaves of the lamp." Aladdin's mother, terrified at the sight of the genie, fainted, when Aladdin, who had seen such a phantom in the cavern, snatched the lamp out of his mother's hand, and said to the genie boldly, "I am hungry, bring me something to eat." The genie disappeared immediately, and in an instant returned with a large silver tray, holding 12 covered dishes of the same metal, which contained the most delicious viands, 6 large white bread cakes onto plates, 2 flagons of wine, and 2 silver cups. All these he placed upon a carpet, and disappeared. This was done before Aladdin's mother recovered from her swoon. Aladdin had fetched some water, and sprinkled it in her face to recover her, whether that or the smell of the meat effected her cure. It was not long before she came to herself. "Mother," said Aladdin, "be not afraid, get up and eat. Here is what will put you in heart, and at the same time satisfy my extreme hunger."
Please like, shares, and subscribes to my page and channel VSX Learning English, page of focused English.